Hi everyone, my name is Jen Anthony and I would like to welcome you to my class. And if you are on this class, I believe that gusto nimo makatuon og programming and at the same time medyo dili pan anak ka deep imuhang foundation or knowledge with regards to programming. That's why all throughout this discussion, we will try to talk about the fundamentals in programming or the basic concepts in programming, and also to make sure that all of the information will be relayed properly to the audiences. I'll be using both English and Visaya language. And yeah, before we start, we'll have to introduce muna the contents of this discussion. We will start, of course, by defining the different terminologies programming, and then we'll differentiate or classify different kinds of programming languages into either high level or low level programming languages. And then we'll get to know the different approach or paradigms in programming. And of course, we'll discuss the different or most commonly used elements in programming. And the most important part of this discussion, of course, is to know how to design or formulate an algorithm, which is an important aspect before learning programming itself because it helps us know how to write instructions in a step-by-step na process to solve a problem. And we will do it using pseudocoding or flowcharting. Okay, so let's start, of course, with the first topic by defining all the terminologies that we might encounter later on while learning programming. So, if you are a newbie, you have probably asked yourself kung unsa ang programming, di ba? So, according to Khan Academy, programming is the process or the practice of creating a set of instructions to tell a computer how to perform a task. So, kung imo siyang i-compare sa real world concept, it's like asking someone to do something. And let's say, for example, if you are a manager and gusto nimo suguon ang imuhang assistant to write a weekly report, and let's say imuhang assistant is baguhan lang, you need to provide an instruction kung unsa ang iyang buhaton. It's either communicated via verbal commands or sometimes via written document. It depends. For as long as na instruction nga i-follow ni assistant. The same pod sa ang concept sa programming is the same sa ingon ana, di ba? But instead of communicating with a person, you will be communicating with a computer. Meaning, you'll have to write instructions so that the computer would know what to do, and that is the practice, of course, of programming. So let's say, for example, um, the computer and gusto nimo siya nga mag-perform siya certain task, so you need to write a systematic instruction to the computer. And that practice is known as the practice of programming or computer programming. And you as a person nga nagsulat sa code, you are referred to as a programmer or sometimes as a developer. It depends kung asa nga term ang imuhang gusto i-follow. But the problem is sa computer man good naasili kaugalingon nila nga language nga dili na to masabtan, and at the same time dili sad ta nila masabtan. So basically we need to find a way to communicate with them. That's why we have come up with a systematic approach. That systematic approach, of course, is the practice of programming using a programming language. Again, dili masabtan sa computer ang ato ang language, so we need to follow a systematic approach by using a tool known as a programming language nga mao'y gamiton nato pagsulat og instruction para masabtan ni computer ang ato ang gusto ipabuhat sa iyaha. So again, programming is the practice of writing instruction to a computer, and then programmer is the one who write the instruction, and programming language is the language or the tool that we use to write instructions for the computer to understand. And katong group of instruction, katong collective instructions nga imong gisulat, those are referred to as a program. So program is a collection of written instructions that the programmer created using a tool known as a programming language. So, unsa ba yung mga examples of programs? Well, there are plenty of examples of programs. For example, na dira is kanang program nga mo accept og input nimo using the keyboard. So, Meaning ang keyboard nimo mismo na siya embedded nga program nga makaila kung unsa ang imong gi-input nga key or data via the keyboard. And another one is a program that would store data inputs into the memory and program sad nga makaprocess og data sa central processing unit. And of course, mga program nga maka-display og output. For example, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and even your browsers nga maka-display og output sa imuhang monitor or sa imong projector. Those are programs. What I'm trying to say is most of the hardware or software components sa imuhang, I mean, all of the hardware and software components sa imuhang computer system, they are all coded with programs for them to know what to do. Okay, so I mentioned a while ago about programming languages, di ba? I've mentioned nga ang computer na sila kaugalingon nila nga language, so we need to communicate with them using programming language because the language of the computer is a series of zeros and ones, and it's known as the computer language or the machine code. Zeros and ones are known as the binaries. Okay, so again, ang language of computer is a machine language using binaries or a series of zeros and ones. Therefore, we need to communicate with them using a programming language kaya para makasulat ng instruction. So, ang trabaho ni programming language is to basically translate the written instructions into machine language. Again, the job of a programming language is to translate the instructions na gisulat ni programmer into machine language para masabtan ni computer. Ang pinaka-basic example, of course, dra sa mga programming languages are Java, C++, Python, PHP, and so on and so forth. Daghan pa jud kaayo, di ba? And since we are talking about language, there are certain rules nga dapat i-follow sa mga programmer nga mogamit sa isa ka certain programming language. The same sad sa rules sa ato ang sa real world nga language. For example, 'di ba, in Tagalog or English, we have certain grammar nga i-follow to speak those languages. The same lang pud sa programming languages. They have rules to follow and those rules are known as syntax. For example, rules on how to output data using Java or output data using Java, they have to follow a certain syntax nga i-code ni programmer, of course, kay para mogana ang iyang gusto buhaton. Okay? So other terminologies that we need to be acquainted with, includes the source code. Pag may natag source code, it refers to the code or programming statements nga gisulat ni programmer. So source code katong code mismo nga gisulat niya gamit ang IDE or gamit ang isa ka programming language. And then after niya nakasulat og source code, when he's done, iyahang i-save, tapos iyaha dayong pre-process using a preprocessor. Ang purpose sa aning preprocessor, of course, is i-convert niya imong source code into a single file, which is, depende actually, daghan kay klase sa kanang mga file nga i-convert ni preprocessor. We have object file, we have mga different classes, or anything. 'Di ba? And after niya na ma-compile into a single file or ma-compress into a single file, ang next na mahitabo is it take in siya as an input by the compiler. So when we say compiler, it refers to a program nga mag-translate sa imuhang source code into a machine language. Okay? So that's the purpose of a compiler. There are actually two types of translator. Of course, ang pinaka-common is the compiler, and then we have the interpreter. Ang purpose ni compiler is to basically translate the source code into a machine code, like pang-isahan jud. Iyasang i-convert or i-translate tanan source code nimo into a machine code before niya i-execute. While on the other hand, ang interpreter iyahang i-translate line by line before niya iyasa i-translate line by line. So for example, line 1, translate, then execute. Then after that, next line na naman, execute. Next line na naman, execute. Ingon ana sa compiler, I mean sa interpreter. Okay? So another terms na imuhang dapat timan-an, of course, is the syntax error. So syntax error refers to the message gina return sa imuhang compiler just in case na ay mali sa imuhang syntax. So for example, na error sa syntax ng imuhang gi-type, mali ang imuhang gigamit nga syntax, or if naabay error sa imuhang logic, so meaning maghatag siya og message pabalik sa imuha to tell you that there is something wrong with your code. So ang tawag na is syntax error message. And on the other hand, if you want to remove those errors, if you want to remove those problems in your code, including na dra mga flaws sa imong logic, that's the process of debugging. Okay, debugging or removing or the removal of errors from your source code. And then we also have the term na bugs. So bugs refers to the problems. Katong mga errors sa imong code, mo na siya ang bugs. And then removing bugs is the process of debugging. Okay? So let's talk about IDE. So IDE refers to the Integrated Development Environment. Basically, it's the software, or it's a program or software development environment wherein dito ka magsulat sa mga instructions nga imuhang gusto ipabuhat sa computer using a programming language. Okay? So aside from that, dito asad nimo i-test ang imuhang source code. Dito asad nimo i-compile mo source code, dito asad nimo i-execute mo source code, pwede nimo na tanan buhatan sa isa ka IDE or Integrated Development Environment. So another term for this is the editor. So mo na siya, dito ka mag-code sa imuhang program. One of the Some of the common features sa IDE, of course, is aside from editing source code is syntax highlighting. Gina-highlight niya kung unsot ng mga different syntaxes. Mahibalaan nimo kung naa kay mali kay dili siya mo follow sa iyang color coding. So yeah, that's one of the common features sa IDE. Another one, of course, is autocomplete nga mechanism. Like, wala pag, let's say for example, mag-type ka og isa ka code and then taas kay siya. So instead, na mo siyang i-type og tanan, i-type nimo siyang mano-mano, you will get shortcuts. Kaya para automatic na lang nimo pag-enter, automatic na niya i-fill out ang remaining parts sa imuhang code. And then we can also build executables. For example, in C++ or for example in DevC nga IDE, you can write C++ programs and then pag compile nimo automatic siya ma-convert into an executable file. So basically, pwede na nimo siya maparaan anywhere. And aside from that, you can also convert your source code nga from .java into other file formats. For example, .class or other file formats nga pwede nimo gamit and pwede ni nga naay purpose sa imuhang Java programming development. So you can do that with an IDE. And of course, you can use IDE as well to debug because naa siya yung mga syntax error message. It will tell you kung asa dapit ang ay problema. So you will know, di ba? For example, if naay kulang sa imuhang semicolon or if naay error sa imuhang syntax, it will tell you what's the problem. So you will be enlightened kung unsay dapat imuhang i-change. And then next, we'll talk about the different levels of programming languages. So almost all of the languages that we know right now, they can be classified into two different levels of programming languages, either high level or low level. Although pag maingon tag low level, it only refers to two types of languages, and they are the machine code and the assembly language. So pag maingon tawag ka ng low level, wala na dyan lain machine or assembly language lang dyan, while the rest are referred to or classified to as high level languages. For example, Java, C++, PHP, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's be acquainted with low level muna. So when we say low level, it's referred to as low level because duol kay siya sa machine. Kung tanawin niyo sa kung tanawin niyo sa ato ang pyramid diri sa screen, ang low level language is very they work closely with the hardware. So meaning sa mga switches, mga gates or the electronic components of your computer, they work directly with the electronic components of your computer. For example, ang machine language, because that's the native language of the hardware, diba? Zeros and ones dyan na ilahang language. So meaning it's a low-level language. And aside from that, it's also referred to as low level because of the level of abstraction. Sa low level kasi, almost zero or very low ang level of abstraction. That's why it's referred to as low level. And if you don't know what is abstraction, it refers to a concept wherein pwede nimo ma-hide ang ang process sa isa ka function or isa ka procedure. Let's say for example, when you step on an accelerator, you know nga mudagan o kusog imong sakyanan pag mo step ka sa imong accelerator, but you don't know the mechanism or how the accelerator does it inside, di ba? Wala ka kabalo giunsa na ni accelerator. All you know is that mo paspas og dagan ang imong sakyanan. That's the concept of abstraction. Nakatago ang process. The only thing you know is that it does the job, di ba? That's abstraction. In low level, almost impossible ni mo na siya mabuhat because you have to explicitly write the instruction yourself. Meaning, kung unsay gusto nimo ipabuhat kay machine, you really have to write it step by step. So halos zero ang iyahang level of abstraction. That's why it's referred to as low level language. Okay? Common use of low level languages, of course, is to build programs that would communicate with the hardware directly. For example, mga embedded programs. Let's say for example, kanang mga program nga makasense og heat, movement sa imuhang mga smart gadgets. Those are coded with low-level languages. Mga programs sa imuhang computer, for example, um, let's say kanang program nga mag-store og data sa imong memory or mag-process og data sa CPU or even kanang program nga mag-load sa mga operating system nimo. Those are low-level languages ng mga programs. Okay? And another example of low-level language aside from machine language is the assembly language. But this time, assembly language is not the native language of your hardware. Usually, ginagamit lang ang assembly language to communicate directly with the processor. So it's still considered as low level because it's for the processor. It's made to communicate with the processor, and yeah, there are different ways to use assembly language, but usually ang ginagamit niya ani is mga mnemonics or symbols nga naay gina-represent nga instructions nga masabtan sa processor sa imong computer. So, examples of those mnemonics are kanang makita ninyo sa inyong screen, although dili kay ko familiar ana nila because I'm not an assembly programmer, but those are just the basic nga mga mnemonics or symbols, okay? Like I've mentioned, assembly language is not a native language of the computer, so meaning dili po na siya masabtan sa computer directly. So if you are an assembly programmer, you need to have an assembler, di ba? Para ma-convert ang imuhang code into a machine code. Okay, so you need to use an assembler. Kung i-compare ni mo ni siya sa mga high-level languages, mga high-level languages man i-convert niya directly ang imuhang source code into a machine language, di ba? But sometimes there are high-level languages na nagagamit og assembler. So instead na from source code to machine language using a compiler, ang nahitabo is from source code i-convert ni compiler into a, let's say for example, an object file nga dawaton ni assembler tapos dito adayon niya i-convert into a machine language. Kasagaran mahitabo na siya if you are using high-level programming language to code programs with the intention to communicate with the hardware. For example, mga robotics ng mga programs, let's say Arduino, something like that, because you need to communicate with the electronics components kasi. So you need to have an assembler. So yeah, that's an example of the low level languages. And low level languages are very hard to use because, like I've said, it's a series of zeros and ones if you're dealing with with the machine language, and then mnemonics or symbols with the assembly language. So dili ka siya friendly, especially for programmers nga baguhan lang. That's why they came up with a new type or classification of programming languages, and these are the high-level programming languages. So high-level languages, they allow the use of reasonable terms. For example, read, write, add instead of the sequences of zeros and ones. So instead na binary or mnemonics, ang ginagamit instead is katong mga commonly used English terms. Napagani uban nga mga languages nga nagagamit og mga local terms. For example, Chinese nga mga programming languages or Filipino nga mga programming languages. They use their own local language to have to to name certain syntaxes, di ba? So yeah, that's the common characteristic of a high-level programming languages. But aside from that, it's also referred as high-level because, as you can see, based sa iyahang pyramid, it's placed higher in the pyramid because of the level of abstraction. Medyo taas ang level of abstraction sa high-level programming languages because there are languages nga naay mga predefined methods or mga predefined classes na pwede nimo gamiton to process data. For example, let's say for example math.pow sa Java. So it's a function used to get the result of the base and the exponent, diba? You don't know how it is being done inside that method. The only thing you know is that it provides the right answer to your problem, diba? So that's an example of a high level abstraction, and that's very common with high level programming languages. Okay, so basic example of the high-level programming languages kay kana inyong nakita dra. As you can see, this one is a Java code, and as you can see, nagagamit siya og mga common English terms like public, void, and new, system. Those are English terms that you would easily understand, di ba? So it's a high-level programming language. We have Java, C++, PHP, and so on and so forth. Next is we'll talk about programming paradigms. So when we talk about paradigms, it's just basically the approach on how to do programming or yung mga pamaagi ninyo on how to code a programming. For example, in doing research, you have different types of research. Um, you have the kuan kanang research nga descriptive, you have research na kanang circuit tao gana yeah, there are different types of research nga pwede ninyo gamit. The same pod with regards to programming, there are different approach to coding programs. Ang pinaka example na classification, of course, are the imperative and the declarative programming, and we will get to know them one by one. So, ano yung imperative? Let's say, for example, if we talk about imperative approach, it's the type of writing instruction wherein kinahanglan jud nimo explicitly write ang imuhang procedure. Okay? So, it refers to the how concept. So, based on the definition, as you can see, imperative programming is a paradigm of computer programming where the program describes steps that change the state of the computer. Like declarative, imperative programming explicitly tells the computer how to accomplish it. So it focuses on the how aspect. For example, if you have a father and dili siya makatrabaho kay medyo nagkasakit siya, so nabara ang inyong kanang, let's say nabara ang inyong tubo, and gisugo kaniya to fix the pipe. So, kay di man kay kasuhito, so gitagaan kag procedure sa imuhang papa, gidictate niya ang procedure para sundon nimo para ma-successfully done nimo ang pag-fix sa inyong pipe. So, that's the example of imperative programming. So, as you can see here in our example code sa screen, you have a variable, and inside the variable we have the characters na HELLO. So we have an array of characters na HELLO under sa variable na chars. Okay? So, for example, ang task is gisugo ka nga kaning mga characters imuha siyang i-copy padulong sa string message na variable. So, gusto nimo na siya i-copy dito as a message nga variable. So, ang gibuhat nimo is nag-provide ka step-by-step instruction on how to do it. Meaning, we use for loop. If you're familiar with for loop, meaning we iterate from the first character down to the last character. Giisa-isa na to kada character from HELLO. Giisa-isa na to pasa kay message hantod na buo niya ang tibuok word nga hello. Okay? So that's imperative programming. Step by step talaga yung procedure. On the other hand, declarative is grabe taas ang iyahang kanang level of abstraction because it focuses on the what aspect. It doesn't matter kung unsa ang steps. It doesn't focus on outlining all the intermediate work steps because it only focuses on what it can do. For example, kato akong gi-mention gaina, when you call math.pow na method sa Java, wala ka kabalo giunsa na niya pag-calculate dito ang base with the exponent all you know is that after nimo i-method call, after nimo magpasa og argument, you'll get the result, diba? You'll get the result between the base and the exponent. So that's declarative programming. For example, sa katong concept na to gain nga giingon na to nga katong magsugo imuhang father to fix the pipe, and since you don't know how to fix the pipe, ning tawag ka og kanang plumber to fix the pipe. Wala kay pakialam kung saan niya pag-ayo, wala kay pakialam with the procedures. The only thing you care about is that na-fix ang pipe. That's declarative programming. And based diri sa atong example na code, same lang gyapon, we are being tasked to copy the the characters na HELLO to the variable na message, but instead of explicitly defining the steps, what we did instead is gitawag lang nato ang string.value nga method, and tapos atong gipasa ang chars na variable, automatic na dayon nga iyahang gipasa or iyahang gicopy ang mga value nga HELLO padulong sa message na variable. We don't know how it happens or how they does it. All we know is that nabuhat niya ang atong gusto buhaton. That's declarative programming. Okay, so if you are a newbie in programmer, it's better to practice imperative programming for you to be able to know how to write algorithms step by step. Okay, so there are two common types of imperative programming. We have the procedural and the object-oriented programming, but we'll focus muna on the procedural programming. So from the word itself na procedural, it refers to a style in programming in which ang code i-execute niya one after another in sequence, meaning procedural, step by step ang pag-execute niya from step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. For example, if you are being asked to you are being asked to cook a food, since dili kay ka familiar, ning kuha kag libro, ning tanaw ka sa procedure, of course, ning follow ka sa first step, second step, third step, fourth step, fifth step. That's an example of procedural programming. So another concept sa procedural programming is that ang mga common operations, I mean, mga related operations, pwede niya i-group into a subunit called procedures. For example, let's say for example, naakay code nga nangayog pangalan, nangayo og age, nangayo og address, nangayo og kanang telephone number, nangayo og kanang other personal details. So, imuha siyang gi-group ni muna ng mga statement kay related man sila ng mga statement. It focuses on registration, di ba? So, imuha siyang gi-group ng mga statement niya, gipangalanan nimo siya og procedure nga registration or registration procedure. So, another one is, let's say for example, nagbuhat na po kaglaing procedure, ang pangalan is deposit procedure. So, sulod sa imuhang deposit nga procedure, you have of course, mga steps on how to deposit a money. And then, another na naman, for example, procedures on how to withdraw. So, gipanganlanin mo siya og withdraw procedure because inside the withdraw procedure, you have the steps on how to withdraw money. So, step by step. So, kung imo, of course, kung imuhang i-base sa kanang procedural nga programming aspect, so magsugod jud ka of course with the procedure registration or registration procedure because you cannot withdraw or deposit without a registered account. So mag-register sa ka, and then you can deposit and then withdraw. Diba? That's the flow in procedural programming. Top-down ang laing term niya because it will start from the top and ends at the bottom part of the code. Okay, so based on this example, as you can see here, mag-start ang ato ang code usually sa main method. Okay? Ma-execute jud primero ang main method because that's the entry point of the Java program. And inside sa main method, nag-execute na pug kaog laing method known as the method 1. Ang tawag ani of course is the procedural call. Kung gusto nimo i-execute ang laing procedure, you have to call those procedures. For example, diri aside sa main method, we have three other methods. We have method 1, method 2, or method 3. We can also call them as procedures, di ba? Procedure 1, procedure 2, procedure 3. So, of course, kung iparan na itong program, ang una diyong moran is ang main procedure or the main method. And next, of course, is iyahang gi-execute ang method 1. So, pag-execute niya sa method 1, this one is the method call or the procedure call. So, gitawag niya sa method 1. gi-execute ni pagka-execute sa method 1, na-execute sad ang kaning line of code. Kaning this is method 1, na-output siya. So, muna, na-output niya, this is method 1. After that, nana po another nga procedure call. So, iyahang gi-execute ang method 2. Gitawag niya ang kani, method 2. Okay, so na-output ang this is method 2. As you can see, you have this is method 2. So, after niya nag-output, nana po yung procedure call. This time, ang gi-call niya is ang method 3. So, nindiretso siya sa method 3. Ihang gi-output si this is method 3. Okay? So, if you are wondering, sir, nganong na-skip niya ng another message? Nganong sa pinaka-last ning output ang another message whereas naaman unta siya sa method 2, di ba? Dapat mauna man ang method 2. Well, ang explanation ana is kani. When a program calls a procedure, the current logic is temporarily abandoned until mahumantong gi-method call nimo. For example, diri ata, gi-output niya ang this is method 2, di ba? So, ihang gi-output na this is method 2. Ang next sa output is ay procedure call. Gi-procedure call niya si method 3. So, mahitabo, iyahasa nang i-abandon, mo diretso sa siya kay method 3. So, i-abandon sa niya another message, mo diretso sa siya kay method 3. And then, gi-output niya, this is method 3. So, iyahang gi-output. And after that, wala na may laing statement, na-terminate siya, ning balik na po siya, padulong diri and mo na, gitiwas na niya ang another message mo na sa pinaka-last ang another message. And yeah, based on ang akuan ha, every time nga mag-call ka og procedure, it will temporarily abandon the previous procedure until mahumantong bag-o. Okay? Next is the object-oriented programming. So when we say object-oriented programming, it refers to a paradigm in programming that focuses on objects, di ba? Kung sa procedures, we talked about a series of related operations or a series of related statements, i-group niya into procedures, di ba? We talk about kapag may procedures, ang mga group of statements, ihang i-grupo into a procedure. Diri pod sa object-oriented programming, ang mga procedures ihang i-group into objects. So, meaning, OOP is an extension of the procedural programming kasi andun pa rin yung mga procedures, andun pa rin yung step-by-step process. Pero ang mahitabo, ang katong mga procedures nga related with one another, iyahang i-grupo under an object. Okay? So, si object sad, pwede sad siya i-grupo. So, a collection of objects, kung daghan ng objects, pwede sad siya i-grupo under a class. Okay? So, meaning, in object-oriented programming, it focuses on classes, objects, and of course, the applications to manipulate those objects. The best thing about OOP is that it focuses on the real-world activities. Okay? So, it's made to develop programs nga na intention to solve real-world problems because if you look around, there are a lot of objects, di ba? Anywhere you see, yung mga objects na sila, yung electric fan mo, yung computer, yung mga cellphone, those are objects. And if we say object, they have properties, di ba? They have information that describes them, and they have behaviors, mga methods or mga functions na ilang pwede mabuhat. For example, let's say the object is a woman, di ba? A woman has properties. It has a name, it has a date of birth, na gender, na vital statistics, and at the same time, a woman can eat, sleep, talk, and walk. And those are what we call the behaviors. And what's the purpose aning mga properties and behaviors? Well, they are very useful in terms of classifying an object. Ma-identify nato kung unsa ang class sa isa ka object based sa iyang properties and behaviors. For example, pag maingon ta og someone with a name, someone with a date of birth, someone with a gender, and at the same time, someone who can eat, sleep, talk, and walk, that's basically a human. Therefore, we can classify woman as a human. Okay? So that's the concept of object-oriented programming. Okay, so like I've mentioned, it focuses on class, objects, and of course, properties and behaviors. So let's define them one by one. So class describes a group or a collection of objects with common properties and at the same time common behaviors. So in short, class is the blueprint of an object. Si class ang naga-define kung unsa ang mga properties or behaviors ni object. Like I've mentioned a while ago, ma-identify nato kung unsa ang class ni object based sa iyahang properties and behaviors because class is the blueprint of an object. Okay? So for example, if we say a vehicle nga class, it's a given nga pwede siya madrivean, pwede siya makapark, and at the same time, a vehicle has a make and model, and at the same time, a color and fuel. Okay, so one of the example of vehicle, of course, is a car. You can also have motorcycle. You can also have different like an airplane, diba? Different types of vehicle. So there are different types of vehicle. I mean class. So kung tayo ang class, imuha na siyang i-create, gusto na nimo siya i-instantiate, ang tawag na is object. So basically, if we say object, it's the specific concrete instance of a class. The creating an instance is called instantiation. So pag moingon ta og object, it's the creation of a class. Diba? Pag moingon ta og human, so human is just the abstract na concept. Okay? So pag mag-create kag human, of course, it can be either a man or a woman. Diba? So katong si man or a woman, that's the instance of a class or an instance of a human. And a woman or a man is, of course, an object. Diba? That's the explanation of class and then the object. All right. So like I mentioned, um, a class defines the properties and the behaviors of a certain object. So meaning when we say properties, it refers to the information that defines an object. And at the same time, behaviors, those are things that your object can do. This is similar to a procedural programming actually because when we say behavior, it's a step-by-step process naman, di ba? So just to give you an idea, properties can be also referred to as attributes and behaviors can also be referred to as methods. Later on, as we go deeper in object-oriented programming, you will know why gitawag na to siya objects and class, especially when we instantiate class and at the same time, especially when we learn how to do the other concepts of object-oriented programming, for example, polymorphism, inheritance, and other concepts in OOP. However, for now, let's just focus on this overview since kinahanglan sa natutunan ang programming before we proceed with the deeper knowledge or deeper discussion about OOP. Okay, so this is just an example code in Java using the OOP concept, right? Diba? Like I've mentioned, the class is the blueprint of an object. It defines what are the properties and behaviors of an object. That is why, based on this code, okay, so this one from line 1 to line 16, this is a class. That's the definition of a class. And inside the class, we have properties like name, like breed, okay? And then we have methods or the behaviors like get name, get breed. So kung mga tanong mo, sir, nganong ang iyahang method dili man bark, dili man run? Well, katong bark, run, those are the real world talaga na behaviors. But in programming, we focus on behaviors or methods that we use to manipulate the that we can use to manipulate the properties. For example, ang properties nato sa pet is name and breed man. So to manipulate them, we have the method get name and get breed. Okay. So again, the properties and the methods are within the class na kuan kanang definition. And then asa na part ka nag-create ra og method? Well, diri na part sa to ang kuan kaning pet my pet equals new pet and then you provided the arguments. So this part right here is the part wherein nag-create ka og object. That's the instantiation of a class and it becomes an object. So pag may instantiation of a class, as you can see, you still have the name of the class, which is pet, and of course, my pet is the object. Okay, so that's just an example, and dili sa na ako siya explain kung unsa na siya or unsa na siya pag-code because we'll have to wait until we learn programming itself, alright? So let's proceed on the fourth topic. Let's talk about the elements of programming. There are different elements in programming that you will encounter once mag-code na jud ka, but for now, we'll focus on the most common one. Let's start with the variables, di ba? Pag may itong variables, let's just say, for example, nagpuyo ka sa isa ka, let's say nagpuyo ka sa isa ka balay or isa ka subdivision or isa ka villa, alright? So, kanang imong lugar nga gipuy-an, of course, you have a certain address. For example, House 1, Block 4, Phase 3, Magallanes Street, Barangay New Pandan, something like that. Those are example of the address. Um, on the other hand, kay medyo taas man kayo na siya paminaw, dili mo kayo siya ma-memorize. So, we provide names sa tuang balay, di ba? You have, for example, the Guzman Residence, Ramos Residence, instead na katong full address yun ang imong i-identify. Same sa dra ang variable. So, as you can see, based on definition from tutorial's point, variables are the names you give to computer memory locations which are used to store values in a computer program. Kasi ganito yun, pag mag-input ka og data sa isa ka program or sa imuhang computer, ang katong data nga imuhang gi-input, automatically ito siya ma-store sa memory sa imuhang computer temporarily. So pagka-store niya na ay certain location dito ang dito siya i-store. Pero random ang iyang location, meaning dili fixed. Every time nga mag-input kag data, palahi-lahi ang iyang location. And then kato nga mga location, na ato sila yung mga certain addresses. Pero ang mga addresses kasagaran kay medyo taas, lisod i-memorize. And at the same time, since random man, so it's hard for you to familiarize kung asa siya nga address na store. So, ang gibuhat instead sa mga brilliant minds sa programming, nagkamap sila ng idea nga instead of using those addresses to reference the location, why not magbuhat ta og variables? Ang gibuhat is, for example, kung mag-input kag data, ang mahitabo is, kung mag-input ka og data, let's say, input ka og 25, katong 25, saluon to siya ni variable. Okay? Pag salo ni variable sa data, ma-store siya sa location sa imuhang memory. So, instead na ang address ang imuhang gamiton para mahibalan kung asa to nakastore ang imuhang data, ang variable na instead imong tawagon. Okay? So, for example, mo-reference kag let's say for example, int a equals 0. So, kana si 0 dra, ma-store na siya sa memory location. For example, dra, ma-store siya sa memory location. Yeah, let's say for example, ang iyang location is 2000, ang iyang address. Random. It could be 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. It doesn't matter, di ba? So, ma-store si 0 kay memory location nga ang address is 2000. Pero instead na mag-focus ta sa 2000 nga address, ang atong gigamit instead is a nga variable. So meaning, dili si 2000 atong tawagon, kundi si variable a. Mas better, hindi na ito malimtan. Dali ra na hinumduman si a, di ba? So pag tawag nimo kay a, automatic nga makuha nimo ang value nga 0. So instead na 2000 nimo ang tawagon, a imong gitawag, makuha nimo ang value nga 0 nga nakastore sa location sa imuhang memory. That's the purpose of variables. Next is the conditionals. Conditional is one of the example of a control structure. So from the word itself, the control structure, it refers to the mechanism of controlling the flow of your program. So pwede nimo makontrol ang flow sa imong program. For example, when siya mag-output ani, when siya mo calculate ani, when siya mag-stop. Those are example of control structures. And it's very important ng imong program na ay control structure kay para medyo bright pa din mong program, di ba? Kabalo siya mo decide on its own. So, ang pinaka-best example of control structure is, of course, the conditionals. Conditional statements it tells a program to execute different actions depending whether a condition is true or false. For example, let's say, for example, kung i-compare nito siya sa real-world concept, let's say, ang imuhang grade is 27, no. Ang imuhang grade is 95, so mag-decide ka, isulti ko ni kay mama or dili. If akong grado is taas og 90, mas taas was 90, so akong isulti kay mama. If dili, then dili na akong isulti kay mama. Yung conditionals, di ba? So let's say for example, diri sa code, diri sa flowchart, as you can see here, we have int a equals 0 and int b is equals to 6. So the value of a is 0 and the value of b is 6. So pag musulod siya diri sa statement, so a less than b. So, ang value ni A is 0 man, so that's less than 6, which is the value B, di ba? So, 0 less than 6, 0 greater than 6, mag-false ang iyang result. So, pag false, i-follow ni niya nga statement, so kani ang iyang i-execute. Okay, so ningon ana ang conditionals. It helps you decide, or it lets your computer decides what to do. Ang pinaka-best application ani, of course, is kanang sa inyong mga keyboards using your keyboard sa computer games. Diba? Sa computer games, pag i-press nimo ang W, mo move forward ang imong character. Pag i-press nimo ang A and S, mo move sideward siya. If i-press nimo ang Z, mo move backward siya. So each of those nga reaction sa imong program na ay conditionals nakapalooban na nga code. Another one is the loops. Loops, again, is also an example of a control structure. Almost the same siya kay conditionals. The only difference is that it allows you to process statements repeatedly. Okay? Pabalik-balik ang pag-process sa statements. For example, let's say, sa imong Facebook account, nang input ka og imong username o sa imong password, tapos mali ang password ng imong gi-input. So, pag press nimo sa password, ning balik siya, ningon siya, oh, please try again. Ning input na pud ka, mali na pod, sige siya, please try again, hantod na lock ang imong account. Niingon si Facebook na your account has been temporarily locked because babalik-balik kag mali og input sa imong password. So that's an example of a looping. You are repeatedly executing the same statements again and again until ma-reach nimo ang certain condition, di ba? So ningon ana sad sa loops, di ba? All right. So for example, diri you have int a equals 0, int b is equals to 6. Ang atong gusto diri ay si a gusto na to patubuon ang iyang value padulong kay 6. So ang limit na to is ang 6, which is the value of b. So sa flowchart, ang value ni A is 0, ang value ni B is 6. So, A is less than B. So, that's A less than 6. Di ba? True. So, ano siya dra? Balin siya dra. May execute ni siya ani. So, A equals A plus 1. So, basically, mag-add lang ka og 1 sa imong current value ni A. So, ang A mahimo ng 1. Because 0 plus 1 is equals to 1. Balik na po siya. I-repeat na po niya ang statement. So, 1 less than 6. True pa rin. Add na po siya. Balik na naman. 2 less than 6, add na po siya, balik na naman. 3 less than 6, balik na po siya. Hantod, ma-reach niya ang iyahang limit. For example, si A karon kay 5 na. So, 5 less than 6, true pa rin. Nag-add siya 1, 6 na. Pagbalik diriya, 6 less than 6, mag-false na ang iyang result. So, iyahan ang stop ang imuhang program. So, that's an example of a loop structure. Okay? And of course, we have the input and the outputs. These are very important elements in programming because program is about interacting with the computer and your computer doesn't know what to do kung wala po data, of course, nga nakakuandra. Tanan nga mga program na adto na sa data nga gina-process. It's either mano-mano nga pag-input sa user or nagagamit siya og sensor to get data from the environment. So basically, naadto na siya input and output. So in programming, of course, you need to have input as well. So mogamit ka keyboard to input data. Yung katong data nga imuhang gi-input, ma-store siya sa memory, and then ma-access siya later on ni processor to be processed into an information nga pwede na to ma-display as an output sa ato ang monitor. Okay, throughout history, there are different types of input and output devices. Before, you have punch cards, you have tape storage, disk drive, and right now we have keyboards. Okay. Last but not the least are the functions. So functions are similar to procedures. Based diri as a definition, functions are self-contained modules of code that accomplish a specific task. They usually take in data, process it, and return a result. So once a function is written, it can be used repeatedly. Functions can be called from the inside of other functions. So just to let you know, functions again is the same with procedures. It contains mga related operations nga naay connection with one another, especially to provide an output, di ba? So for example, kana nakita ninyo sa diagram, ang function mo take in as input, i-process niya, and then after that, mag-return siya og output. So those are functions. Later on sa programming, you will learn how to construct your own functions as well. Okay, so let's now proceed on the fifth topic of this discussion, which I believe is the most important topic as well, because it focuses on building a strong foundation on how to solve a problem using programming. Diba? So previously, we discussed in our previous topic the definition of programming. Diba? Programming is the process of writing instructions to let a computer know what to do. Diba? So, katong instructions kay mohang gisulat, there is a certain idea nga gina-follow ana. So naa kay certain plan nga gina-hatch before nimo siya implement into programming. So atuwa na siyang i-define, and at the same time atuwa sad siyang tun-an kung unsaon pagbuhat anang plan nga ato ang gi-mention or kanang idea nga ato ang gi-discuss para makasolve og isa ka certain problem. So first, let's discuss or know what's the definition of an algorithm. Okay, so from TechTarget, it says that algorithm is a procedure or formula for solving a problem based on conducting a sequence of specified actions. So in short, algorithm is the formula, di ba? Formula or the procedure na imuhang gina-follow or imuhang gina-formulate kung paano nimo i-solve ang isa ka problem nga imuhang na-encounter. Kung sa mathematics, di ba, let's say for example na ay gihatag nga problem inyong teacher, and na-realize nimo after analyzing, na-realize nimo nga gusto di ay sa imong teacher na i-solve nimo ang velocity, di ba? So pag solve sa velocity, you have to follow a formula on how to do that or how to solve the velocity. Daghan pa sa mathematics, we have formula sa algebraic no sa kanang algebraic expressions, and then mga formula on how to solve the speed of a certain object nga kanang nag-move. So daghang kayong klase nga formula sa mathematics. The same po na sa programming. Every time nga maka-encounter ka og problem nga kinahanglan nimo i-automate or kinahanglan nimo kodan og program, magplano jud ka. Mag-set up ka og kanang plan or step by step nga plan on how to solve that problem before nimo siya i-implement into a program. So in short, what I'm trying to say is algorithm is the formula, mao na imong gi-create ng formula to solve a problem, and once na ana kay formula, you can now do programming. Pwede na nimo siya i-implement. So programming is the implementation or the elaborate implementation of an algorithm. So daghan kay klase sa algorithm, no? For example, kana pa lang daang pag solve nimo sa sum sa two numbers. For example, nag-program ka og kanang calculator nga makasolve og sum. Kwaon nimo of course ang first number, second number, and then i-calculate nimo, then you will get the sum. That's the most basic nga algorithm. And daghan pa jud kay advanced nga algorithm. For example, kana pa lang daang pag-search nimo online sa imong search engine. Pag-type nimo og input sa imong search engine, pag-click nimo sa search button, i-take in siya na ay kanang function nga mukuha sa imong input, then sulod ato nga function na ay mga step by step procedures dito. Katong step by step procedures nag-follow to siya certain algorithm or certain logic kaya para maka-provide siya og results nimo nga kinahanglan nimo makita sa imong web results or sa imong search results, di ba? Daghan pa algorithm as well para makakita kag mga mutual friends nimo sa imong Facebook na siya formula nga gina-follow. So, sa programming, in order for you to write an algorithm, you have to be systematic, di ba? You have to follow a process. And it depends talaga. There are a variety of ways to solve to write algorithm. Pero ang pinaka-basic talaga is the first thing that you'll have to do is, of course, to define a problem. Ano ba yung pag-define ng problem? Meaning, dapat mag-create ka og algorithm, dapat na problem, di ba? You cannot write an algorithm without a certain problem. It's useless. And then another one, you have to analyze the problem na gihatag sa imuha. And then you have to write the algorithm. And then right after nimo makasulat og algorithm, you are now ready to implement the algorithm by doing programming. So, meaning last step ang programming, di ba? So, let's give you an example kung unsa ni siya nga mga steps nga akong gipang mention. Okay, so when we talk about defining a problem or problem definition, it focuses on making sure that there is a problem indeed nga nag-exist. And kasagaran sa programming field or sa software development field, the time nga magbuhat kag isa ka algorithm, if naa kay nakita nga problem kasagaran, if naa kay client ka nag-request sa imuha to develop a certain program. Ana man jud kasagaran sa soft dev, di ba? Naa kay client nga nag-request sa imuha nga ipa-automate ilang service or for example suguhon ka mag-develop og kanang enrollment nga system. So imuhang i-identify unsay mga problem nila nga na-encounter, unsay mga process nila kay para mo to imuhang i-convert into a program. So for example, Dria, we have client X would like you to create a program that calculates his employees' monthly salary. Employees are paid per hour with a rate depending on the role. For example, pag manager siya, 150 ang sweldo, pag supervisor 120, pag clerk lang 100 pesos per hour ang iyang sweldo. And at the same time, bawasan sa ng sweldo og mga deductions such as for example sa SSS, PhilHealth and Pag-ibig nga na ay mga corresponding um, value, of course. So, ang unang buhaton ni Mudria is, as a programmer, you really have to listen well. So, importante kaayo ang communication skill diri sa problem definition. You need to ask questions kung unsa jud gusto ni customer ipabuhat sa imuha. So, for example, kani sa problem nga naata diri pagdungog pa lang nimo daan sa gusto ni client, you can easily think nga gusto niya og kanang marag payroll system, di ba? Gusto niya nga mag-develop ka og payroll nga program, tapos rate nagadepende kung pila ang imuhang ay unsa ang imuhang role, and then kwaon sa nimo ang total number of hours kay per hour man. So meaning kung pila ka buk ora ay pila ka oras iyang trabaho mo sa dangyahang sweldo. And then minusa na to og deduction. So kana marag ana imuha siyang i-define nga na ay nag-exist nga problem. And then so second one is you need to analyze, di ba? Sa pag-analyze, the same ni siya sa kanang mag-solve ka og mathematical problem, di ba? You need to get the given numbers. Kasagaran sa setup sa ato ang klase sa mathematics nga class, kasagaran jud na ay mga given data, di ba? Katong mga given data ato to siyang i-analyze para makabalutag unsay gusto ni teacher. Meaning, na given data, based sa given data, makabalutag unsay kulang kay para makuha na to ang output. Ningon anak sa programming. Di ba? For example, ang based dito sa problem previously, makaingon ta nga ang mga given data kay katong rate per hour. For example, if ang role is manager, ang rate is 150. Pag supervisor, ang rate is 120. Pag clerk, ang rate is 100. And then we also have given data. For example, ang deductions kay SSS 650, PhilHealth 300, Pag-ibig 350. So, aside po dana, we can also say that given sad ang kanang fact nga kanang rate times hour per hour ang iyahang kanang pag-calculate sa sweldo. So maka-create na yung tag formula nga okay, so gross salary equals rate times total hours. And then after na to makuha ang gross salary, okay, ato sang kwaon sa daang net salary equals gross salary minus the deductions. Okay? So ningon ana. So meaning ang input nga kinahanglan nato is ang rate and the total hours. Okay? So ma-define dayon nimo, ma-analyze dayon nimo unsay mga given data and mahibal-an sad nimo kung unsa ang imuhang kuhaon nga output. So based diri sa problem nga to ang gina-solve, ang output nga gusto nato kuhaon is the net salary. Di ba? Pag ingon tag net salary, nanadra ang imuhang deductions na minusa na siya daan og deductions. So again ha, sa problem analysis, you need to identify kung unsa ang mga given data, unsa ang mga kulang na data, and at the same time based aning present o kulang nga data, you will know kung unsang output ang imuhang gusto i-provide or imuhang gusto i-output. Okay, so next, ready na, prepared na nga to ang mga formula, kabalo na tagun sa atong buhaton. Ang next is the algorithm formulation. So this one is the most important part, of course, because you need to write the step-by-step instruction na. There are different ways of writing an algorithm. Ang pinaka-common is ang pinaka-common are the pseudocoding and the flowcharting approach. So, let's start muna with the pseudocoding. Pseudocoding, from the word itself, pseudo is meaning dili siya real jud na code, pero kung tan-awon nimo siya, mura siya og tinuod nga programming code, but it's not actually a real programming code because sa programming you have to follow a fixed nga rule, or fixed na syntax. Sa pseudocode, there is actually no fixed syntax. Wala siya gina-follow nga certain syntax. Although mas better kung naka-follow nga certain standards, di ba? So pseudocode is an artificial and informal language that helps programmers develop algorithms. It is a text-based detail or algorithmic design tool. So if in short, ang pseudocode mura lang kag nagsulat sa imong papel kung unsa nga step imong gusto i-follow kay para ma-solve nimo ang problem. That's pseudocoding. So ano ba ang mga steps sa pseudocode? First, you have to arrange the sequence of tasks and write the pseudocode accordingly. So, let's say for example, kung sugoon ka sa imuhang teacher to solve the sum of two numbers. So ang unsa may step nimo, unsa may kanang procedure nimo nga sundon, bawal lain punog magsugod ka diretso sa calculate the sum, di ba? Nga wala pa gani kay given. So meaning kung magbuhat kag algorithm using that problem, so magbuhat kag pseudocode, so meaning first kuhaon sa nimo ang first number, and then ang step 2, get the second number, then step 3, get the sum. Ana lang, di ba? Naka-step by step siya. Bawal man ka magsugod sa get the sum nga wala pa kay given. So kinahanglan jud nimo i-arrange ang imong pseudocode sequentially based sa task and write the pseudocode accordingly. And number 2, you need to start with a statement of pseudocode which establishes the main goal or the aim. Meaning kinahanglan nimo mag-start sa pinakauna ni mga statement, kinahanglan nimo ibutang dito kung unsa ang imong goal. For example, number 1, di ba katong atong sample problem nga i-solve ang sum sa two numbers. So the step 1, get sum, get first number. So kato pa lang word nga get, kabalo na ka nga you will have to get an input for the first number. Step 2, get input for second number. So get pa rin, nandun pa rin yung get. And then third, calculate sum equals first number plus second number. So from the word itself ng calculate, naka-establish na ka og goal nga kinahanglan to nimo to i-calculate ang duha ka number. So that's what I'm trying to say. All right. So for example, before that as well pala, ako asang establish ang mga standards sa pseudocoding. Like I've mentioned, wala siya certain rule, wala siya certain syntax na gina-follow, but it's better to have standards, di ba? Number 1, you have to use control structures. Di ba? In doing programming, like we've discussed in the previous topics, part sa elements of programming ang control structures, katong decision making or while, di ba? For example, ana, kanang moingon tag, if the grade is less than 75, meaning bagsak. Else, meaning pasado, di ba? Merag ana. So another one is a while. So while number is not equal to 100, so ato ang ibalik-balik ang statement. So mag-count from 0 to 100. Yan, mo stop lang siya sa 100. So that's an example of control structure sa pseudocoding. Okay, second, we have to use proper naming convention. In programming, like we have mentioned in the previous topic, variables are very common. You need to use variables to accept input or to accept data from the user. The same ra na sa math, di ba? Na ay sa mga given mo, ingon tawag ka ng let x equals 5, let y equals 10. So, ingon ana po na mga variable. So, kanang mga variables nato, kinahanglan nato na siya gamitan og proper naming convention, panganlan nato siya og tarong, kay para dili ta masaag later on, dili ta makalimot kung unsay purpose ana niya. For example, ang imuhang variable is nangayo ka og input nga pangalan gikan sa imuhang user. Nangayo kag input nga pangalan sa imuhang user. So unsay pangalan sa imuhang variable? Pwede nimo butangan og user name or user full name, user first name, user last name, kay para later on bisan pagpila ka tuig ang milabay, pagtan-aw nimo sa imong code, kabalo kag unsay purpose ana nga variable. So that's an example of using a proper naming convention, di ba? And then you have to indent and use white spaces as well, because it's very important to organize our codes. Mas better kung ako na siyang ipakita later on saan pagbuhat og kanang indentation and at the same time kanang white spaces. Okay? So another one is we have to write pseudocode by keeping it simple and concise. Ayo isulat jud nga buo jud nimo isulat ang mga instructions nimo. As much as possible, use symbols, di ba? As much as possible, use symbols. For example, instead na moingon kag if 1 is less than 2, di ba kanang isulat jud mo nga if 1 is less than 2, so mogamit instead kag symbol nga naga-represent sa less than. For example, if 1, then kitong symbol sa less than, then 2, ano yung nana? You have to keep it simple and concise. Okay? So another one you have to avoid avoid writing pseudocode which is too abstract, and familiar naman mo unsay kanang kuan na unsay definition na ng abstract, so meaning naka-hidden ang imong mga kuan, mga implementation. And writing a pseudocode, it's better to be explicit talaga. May meaning imuha jud isulat one by one talaga yung steps. And then don't be too generalized. Okay, so I've mentioned a while ago about starting with a statement sa pseudocode nga nag-establish og main goal. So kani ang mga example nga mga statement nga nag-establish og goal. For example, kung mangayo kag input kay user, you can use set input initialize. Example lang ha, untahay mangayo ka og kanang name ni user. So set name equals John Anthony, or input name equals Juan de la Cruz. Initialize x equals 5. Ragnana. And then, output, kung mag-display ka og data. For example, print name or something like that, or output data, or show results. Maraging yun, ana. And then conditionals, kato kung gihatag ang nga example. Let's say, if A is less than 2, or if grade is less than 75, something like that. And loops, for example, while A is less than 2, while A is not equal to 100, ang mga nana, mo gamit ka og mga proper jud na kuan kanang terms kay para makabalo or makasabot si programmer kung unsa ang imuhang purpose ana niya nga statement. Okay, so I'll give you an example of pseudocoding implementation kaya para mas masabtan pa. For example, diriya number 1, katong ako ang giingon gay na will have to get the sum of two numbers. Kutahay, getting the sum of the two numbers. So nag-start ta of course o keyword na start because it signifies that the program will start right here. So nagbutang tag start, meaning that mag-start sa tuang program. Okay, so diriya start. And then set A equals 5, B equals 6, sum equals 0. So from this line pa lang with the keyword nga set, you know nga nag-initialize tag mga value diri nag-input taog mga values ato ang variable. Ang value ni A is 5, ang value ni B kay 6, ang value ni sum kay 0. And then sa baba, sa third line, calculate sum equals A plus B. Meaning, i-calculate nato si A, gi-plus nato kay B, and then ang result ato ang gi-assign kay sum. So for example, 5 ang A, 6 is B. So that's 5 plus 6 equals 11. So ang value ni sum karon is 11. And then next is print sum. Ato ang i-output. So meaning mo display dito dapat sa program ang 11. And then exit meaning dra lang kutob ang logic sa imuhang algorithm, stop na siya, humana ang imuhang program. And then another example is counting from 0 to 5. Kung tahay gusto ka mag-display og 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ang 0 ang imuhang starting point, ang 5 ang imuhang ending point. So, again, nag-start ta, kay dra magsugod ang ato ang program, and then nag-set ko og value, ang A is 0, dra starting point, ang B is equals to 6. Gibutang lang ako ang 6 because dapat between siya sa 0 and 6. So, butang lang na ito drag B. Yan na, dra marag limit niya ang 6. Kay before 6, dara siya dapat mag-stop. Pwede good ka magbutang diriya og 5. Kung gusto ka, pwede nimo na siya i-5, walay problema. Ilisan lang nimo ang condition diriya og less than equal kay para mag-stop siya sa 5. So, ato siyang i-kuan. Sige da, ato da siyang perform. Ato siyang i-trace. So, currently the value of A is 0, niya ang B is ato manggilisan gihimo na tog 5. So, that means ang pagbasa ani is while 0 is less than or equal to 5. Then, so if true ang result, i-follow niya ang then, iyahaning i-perform nga code kana draa. Okay, so 0 less than or equal to 5. Is it true or false? Diba true? Kay less than man dyan sa 0 kay 5. So meaning i-execute ni niya nga statement kaning sa sulod. And this is an example of a white space. Okay, a white space or an indentation. Ngano, tungod kay naka-indent, diba? Naka-tab ang imong code. Unsay purpose ana niya? I-organize, meaning kani nga code riya part ni siya sa while. Wala na to gidikit dra kay para dili ta malibog later on. Pwede gud nimo na siya idikit ra, wala problema, pero malibog ka kung kakinsa ni nga part si print A, kakinsa ni nga part si A equals A plus 1. So mas better nga gi-indent na to siya para makakuha kag idea nga kani sila nga statement part ni siya sa while. Nabilong siya kay while. Okay, so let's trace. Print A. So pila ang value ni A? Currently 0, di ba? So gi-print niya ni ang 0, gi-display niya ang 0. So A equals A plus 1. So currently, ang value ni A kay 0 plus 1. So mahimong 1, di ba? 0 plus 1 is 1. I-assign niya kay A. So ang value karon bago ni A is 1 na. Nana siya sa 1. And then, ang while, based sa inyong nibalaan sa elements of programming, mobalik siya sa imuhang while nga statement, di ba? So, ang pagbasa na ani karon is while 1 is less than or equal to 5, which is still true. So, yahanap po ning i-process, i-display niya si 1. And then, a plus 1 na naman, so that means 1 plus 1 equals 2. Mubalik na po siya dito sa ibabaw. So, while 2 is less than equal to 5, true pa rin, i-display niya si kanang 2. And then, ang 2 na to nga A, plus 1 na naman, naging 3. Balik na po draa. So, 3 less than or equal to 5. I-process na po niya. Yan na pong i-print. So, i-print niya ang imuhang 3. And then, wait lang ha. So, this time, ang A na to kay 3 naman. So, 3 plus 1, naging 4. Balik na naman draa sa ibabaw. So, 4 less than or equal to 5. So, i-print na po niya. So, i-print niya si 4. Niya, 4 plus 1, mahimo siyang 5. So, balik na naman sa ibabaw. So, 5 less than or equal to 5. Diba? 5 is less than equal to, 5 is less than 5. Diba? False, pero kaya na may equal. So, true pa rin. Kaya na may equal. Okay, so true pa rin. I-output niya si 5. So, display niya si 5. 5 plus 1 maging 6. So this time, 6 less than or equal to 5. So false na because 6 is not less than 5 and it's not equals to 5. False na. So meaning ma-terminate na ni siya dria. End while na ta. I-process na niya ang end while. Wala na may lan. Exit naman. So exit na. So na-output niyo ang 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's an example of how to implement pseudocoding using a looping structure. Now let's have an example of using conditionals. So we have a problem getting the average grade of 3 subjects and determining if it is pass or fail. Meaning, kuha na to ang average grade. Paano ba magkuha sa average grade na to? I-total, di ba, first ang mga subject and then i-divide na to kung pila ka buok. So, tulo raman ka buok ang atong subject. So, i-plus na to ang tulo ka subject tapos i-divide na to by 3 and we will get the average. And after na to makuha ang average, atong identify kung pasado ba si student or failed. Di ba? So again, we started with a statement start. And then naghatag-tag mga sample nga mga value diri. For example, ang Filipino, 95. English is equals to 90. Math is equals to 75. And currently, average is equals to 0. Gi-zero sana ako ang average because wala ko man takabalo kung pila yung average. Di ba? So next line, gi-calculate na nato. Like I've mentioned, gi-plus na to ang tulo ka subjects divided by 3. And the result, I believe, is 86.67. Okay, so 86.67. So after niya ni nakuha ang average, which is 86.67, iyahan na dayong i-process ang conditionals. And again, if you notice, naka-white space kay para mahabaluta nga kani si print pass, under siya ani nga statement, si print fail, under po siya ani nga statement. Okay, so let's start muna diri ang line kani. Ang pagbasa ni is something like this. If 86.67 is greater than 74, is it true or false? Greater than ba si 86 kay 74? Di ba? True. So, meaning, kay nag-true man siya diri, i-print niya ang pass, process niya na, i-output niya ang pass. So, ang question, iyaha pa ba ning i-execute? Dili na. Kay, nag-true naman, sa conditional good, sa conditional man good, once mag-true na siya, it will disregard the other conditions. So, disregard na ni si print. Di na niya hilabtan si print. Kay pass naman. Diba? So, after that, after ending a statement, diretso siya kay and if, tapos exit. So, ang output is pass. Okay? So, that's the implementation of a pseudocode. I mean, the conditionals using a pseudocode. Okay? So, please, sabto na to pag maayo if you still doesn't get it very well. So, pwede ninyo i-pause ang video and i-analyze kung unsay nahitabo diri sa to ang example. We do tracing or coding tracing or code tracing to know kung unsa jud ang process nga nahitabo by manually manually analyzing and computing each line sa code. So, I suggest nga buhaton ni muna. Okay. So, assuming nga nasabtan na nimo ang problem, let's proceed on the next nga slide. Okay, so katong ato ang problem gaina, katong kwaon niya ang salary, di ba? Na-analyze to nato nga kwaon nato ang net pay or net salary at the end. So, mo ni ako implementation. It depends talaga, it depends sa inyo kung unsa inyo hang pag-implement. It doesn't really matter basta ang ending is pareho taog result. Okay, for example, we started with start, of course, and then nag-set ning rate equals to 0 and role equals manager. So, ang first question, sir, nga ng rate is equals to 0. Because we still don't know kung pila ang ihang rate. Di ba? Wa pa man takabalo pila yung rate. Kaya wa pa takabalo kung sa ang ihang role. Pagabot 3 as kilid, nagbutang tag role equals manager. So, nag-assign tag manager as an example lang na, kay para gusto na to i-calculate daw kung pila ang sweldo niya kung manager, di ba? Gi-identify na to gaina nga before na to makalculate ang sweldo ni employee, kuhaon sa nato ang role. Di ba? So, for example, diri ang role daw ni employee is manager. Okay? So, ang next nga statement is a conditional. So, pangitaon ninyo ang boundary ha, magsugod ta sa if niya, dapat hantod na siya sa kanang end if. Kutob jud na siya sa end if, dapat. Ana. So, naatay tulo ka condition. If role is equals to manager, if role is equals to supervisor, if wala na lain, else. Di ba? You might wonder, nga anong wala kay gibutan dra nga else if role equals clerk, sir? Well, pwede gud ninyo na siya isulat. Walay problema. Pwede na ninyo i-type diri og another nga condition. Else if role equals clerk. Wala na siya problema. Disregard lang nako ang clerk. It's because wala namang gilaing condition. Tulo raman to kabuok. Manager, supervisor, ang ikatulo kay clerk. Ang purpose mong gudaning else is kanang wala nila yung choice. Pag mag-fall siya sa manager, pag dili siya manager, pag dili siya supervisor, wala na jilain. Clerk, rajud, di ba? So, else ang ako ang gibutang. Alright, so balik to diri So, ang value ni role is manager. So, ang pagbasa ni karon is, if role is equals to manager, nagmatch ba? Nagmatch ba ang data ni role, which is equals to manager? Yes, di ba? Nagmatch. Kaya pareho sila, manager, manager. Match. So, iyahang i-execute ni. Meaning, ang rate gaina nga 0, ayahan ang assignan og 150. Kaya 150 may rate ni manager. So, iyahan ang assignan og 150. So, ang question, ihaba ba ning i-execute kanang else if role equals supervisor? Ihaba ba ning i-execute ang else? Dili na. Again, once mag-true na ang imuhang condition, disregard na ang the rest. Diretso na ka sa next nga statement after sa and if. Okay? So, asa man ang next statement? So, kanang set dra, kanang daghan na tong gipang set nga mga data. Nag-set og total hours, gibutang na tog 100. Sample lang na siya kung tahay daw 100 ka oras ang gitrabaho ni manager. And currently, gibutang sa nato ang gross pay og 0, ang net pay og 0, kay wala pa man takabalo pila lang sweldo, i-calculate naman nato. And then ay mga given nga value sa SSS, which is 600, PhilHealth is 250, and Pag-ibig is 250 as well. I think namali ni siya, it's supposed to be 300 and 350, but that's okay. Example lang man na. So, kana si SSS, PhilHealth, and Pag-ibig, given man ang mga data. Si gross pay o sa net pay mo na itong nabuo nga mga formula, mga additional nga mga data, di ba, sa problem analysis nato na identify nato nga kulang siyang variable nga gross pay to calculate the gross and net pay to calculate the net salary or the net pay. And total hours, given dyan na siya. Wala ta kabalo kung pila ka book hours. Ato nang gibutang ng 100. Kaya just in case 100 daw ka hours ang gitrabaho ni manager, nga na-I rate nga 150. Ang next is calculate. Kaning next line. So, gi-calculate na to ang gross pay. That's total hours times rate. Diba? If you remember, nabuo na to na siya nga formula. Total hours is 100 times rate, which is 150. So, magkano ba? Pag 100 times 150. So, let's get our calculator. So, that's 100 times 150. So, 15,000 ang iyang sweldo. So, 15,000 ang sweldo. Diri Okay? So, 15,000 ang gross pay. So, minusan og mga pag-abot sa next nga line, i-calculate ito ang net pay. Sa net pay, we have gross pay, which is 1,500. Minus ang PhilHealth. Pila ba ang PhilHealth? We have 250 minus 250 minus 600. So, meaning Mini-calculate sa dani mo ang 250 plus 250 plus 600. So meaning ang total nga deduction is 1,100. So kung i-minus nimo sa gross pay which is 15,000, so ang dawato na lang ni customer ay ni employee is around 13,900, di ba? 13,900. So meaning ang net pay is 13,900. And after that, so next ng statement, i-print, so meaning i-output na to. So i-output na to si 13,500. So that's the solution nga atong na-come up using the pseudocoding based dito as a problem nga to ang na-encounter ganina with client X. Okay? So next. Alright, so this one, I would like you to test yourself. If you want, you can pause this video after reading the problem. Okay, so write an algorithm that would allow your program to reverse the digits. For example, nag-enter si user og 1,250, ihang i-reverse mahimong 0,521. Okay, so unsa ni mo na siya pag-implement? Unsay solution nimo ana? I want you to come up with a solution and write a pseudocode on your own. So just pause this video muna, and later on we'll come back to see kung unsay solution nako, i-compare nato sa imuhang solution kung the same ba ta. Alright? Okay, so assuming na you're done, let's proceed with my solution. We'll see kung the same ba ta solution. Okay, so problem definition, we'll have to reverse the given digits. Di ba? Ana lang. Reverse any given digits. For example, 1,250, yang himuong 0,521. Okay, so sa problem analysis, we have a given number na 1,250. So si 1,250 mao na given digits na to. And then nato siyang i-reverse into 0,521. So unsa bay pamaagi ninyo? Unsaon ninyo pag-solve ang unsaon ninyo pagkuha sa unsaon ninyo siya pag-reverse? Take note, 1,250 mahimong 0,521. In my way, sa kuang solusyon, ako ang gi-propose is by getting the remainder of the digits. Kuha na ang remainder sa mga digits. So meaning, pag may remainder, that means we will use division. Okay, for example, di ba, let's say 1,250 divided by 10. So the answer is 125. So pila yung remainder, di ba? 0. 0 na. And then so 125, i-divide na to by 10. So that's 12, di ba? So pila yung remainder? Kung 125 divided by 10, pila yung remainder? That's 5. So ang 12, i-divide by 10. The remainder is, the answer is 1, di ba? 12 divided by 10 is 1. The remainder is 2. So meaning, na-reverse, 0, 5, 2, 1 na lang kulang. Maragana. So meaning, we'll just have to divide and get the remainder para ma-reverse na to ang ato ang data. And since na ako gi-mention kayo na nga magsigita og divide sa 10, sigita divide of 10, meaning we'll have to use loop. We'll have to repeat a statement a couple of times, di ba? So ato ang buhatan og loop. Buhatan nato siya og solution. Okay? So ang first solution ako diri is, like I've mentioned, we have to divide the digit by 10. For example, ang given digit is 1,250. So divide na to sila. And then we'll have to get the quotient and the remainder. Quotient and remainder. It's very important to get both quotient and the remainder. So sa first implementation mo ni, digits divided by 10. Sorry, wala lang ako na-edit ang iyahang keyword 3. So digits divided by 10. Diba currently the digit is 1250. So i-divide na to siya 10. Like I've mentioned, the first answer is 125. So digits divided by 10 is equals to 125. So ang value karon ni quote is 125. So ano tong button? Butang sa ako diri ag quote. And then digit. Okay, balik ko na to para mas klaro. Okay, so digits, which is 1,250 divided by 10, ang answer is 125. So muna yung value. And then sa baba, ato sa i-multiply primero. So pila ito, ang quote is 125 times 10. So 125 times 10, that's 1,250. So, 1,250, di ba ang value ni digit is 1,250. So, that's 1,250 minus 1,250, then you will get 0. Okay? So, muna, print rem, kanang second, print rem, ato ang i-output, i-print to na to si rem. So, muna, si rem, 0, di ba, ang remainder. And then, assign quote to digits. I-assign din na to ang value ni quotient to digits. So, pila man ang value currently ni quote, di ba, 125. So, i-assign din na to siya kay digit. So, pag-assign na to kay digit, meaning matanggal si 1,250, mailisan siya, mahimo na lang siyang 125. Okay, so step 3. Go back to step 1, but use quote to be divided by 10. Okay? So, actually, mali ni. Dapat use digit. Okay? So, go back to step 1, but use digit to be divided by 10. Okay? So, balik ta diri sa step 1. So, digit divided by 10. Pila gani atong digit karon? 125 na lang. So, divided by 10, that's equals to 12. So, meaning ang value ni quote, mailisan, mahimo siyang 12. Okay? So, quote is 12 times 10. So, that's equals to 120. So, 125 minus 120 is equals to 5. So, print the remainder. So, that's 0, 5. That's 5 na. Okay? Assign quotient to digits. So, assign quotient to digits. So, meaning, si digit, mahimong value ni, ang value ni quote o ni digit mapareho. So, mahimo siyang 12. And then, go back to step 1. Go back to step 1 na naman. So, digit divided by 10. Pila ang digit na to ron? 12. 12 divided by 10. So, that's 1. Diba? 1. So, sa baba, mahimo siyang 1. So, 1 times 10, so equals to 10. So, pila ang digit? 12, di ba? 12 minus 10 is equals to 2. So, ang remainder is 2. So, print rem, subutan na to si rem, 2. Go back to step 1, but use digit to be divided by 10. So, balik na punta diri So, digit is currently 12 divided by 10. So, digit is currently, no, wait. Okay, so hapit na. Nakalimutan din na to. Assign code to digit pala. Wait, balikan sa itong ito. Assign code to digit. So, meaning, ang value ni code, which is 1, i-assign sa na to kay digit, mahimo siyang 1. Okay, so sorry for that. And then, after that, balik ta sa step 1. So, currently, ang digit is 1. So, 1 divided by 10 is equal to 0 point something, di ba? Na decimal point. But we don't care about the decimal point. Let's just get the, kwaon lang na to ang yahang kuan kanang whole number. So 0 point something to meaning ang whole number is 0, so mawala na siya draa, mahimo na lang 0. Okay? So quote is currently 0. So 0 times 10 is equals to 0. So ang digit is currently 1. So 1 minus 0, so 0. I know 1. Diba? 1 minus 0 is 1. So that's the remainder. So print na to, so muna gi-print na to. And then assign code to digit. So ang value na 0 nga ni code nga 0 ato ang ihatag kay digit. So mahimo pong 0 sa digit. And then pagbalik sa tanawa sa number 4, stop only when digits become 0. So when digits become 0, stop na ta. So currently 0 na, so stop na ta. So the answer is 0, 5 to 1. Nakuha na to, na reverse na to ang ato ang given digits. So yeah, yun na. So if you're still confused, kindly pause the video, analyze the analysis nga naata, the steps that we have, and make sure nga masabtan ninyo. Okay? So let's proceed on the implementation sa algorithm. So as you can see, dili na lang ako na siya explain because na-explain na ako on step by step na to gaina. So as you can see, we have set, nag-set out value, digits is equals to 1,250, quotient is currently 0, remainder is currently 0, and we have our while. So while digits is not equal to 0, so as long as ang digits dili pa 0, padayon pa ang loop, pabalik-balik pa ang statement. As you can see, mo ni ang part nga nag-divide ta sa digit by 10, and then kuha na to ang remainder, and then okay, so nagbalik-balik actually. So, after na ito makuha ang remainder, gi-print na to ang remainder. and then gi-assign na to si digits, gi-assign na to ang quotient nga value to digits. The same na diri Ako lang siyang gi-implement into a pseudocode. Okay? So, yeah, that's the implementation of this problem using pseudocode. Again, if you are still confused, kindly pause the video, analyze the code. Ako lang nang-erase na ka nagbalik-balik ng good. Okay? Assuming that you've gotten the problem already, kasabot na ka, let's proceed on the next nga, nga topic. Let's talk about flowcharting this time. So, kung sa pseudocoding, ang atong gibuhat is nag-type ta og kanang algorithm using talaga the text-based nga approach, like ato jud siyang gisulat og mano-mano. When it comes to flowchart, we'll be using graphical interface instead to show the flow of information. Okay? Because flowchart is a graphical representation of an algorithm. Kasi programmers often use this one for planning as a program planning tool to solve a problem. Because it follows the utilization of symbols na gina-connect nato to indicate the flow of process or flow of information sa inyong program. So we have the following symbols. Pag start gani og end, diba familiar mo to start og exit, we'll start with an oval na shape. Pag arrow, it indicates flow, diba? Kung unsay next. Okay? So kung input or output katong set og print, we'll have to use parallelogram. Set og print katong input og output. So parallelogram. Process is rectangle. Pag may tag process, pareha ng calculate, mga ana, any mathematical or even mga lain pa jud later on makabalo mo sa programming unsay mga different types of process. So we'll have to use a rectangle for that. And then decision making. So it's used for loops and conditionals. Both loops and conditionals, because if you notice, both loops and conditionals nagagamit og mga expression like A less than B, B less than C, mga nana, di ba? So we'll have to use decision or making for that, or the diamond nga shape. So I'll show you an example. Based lang yapon niya mga previous examples sa pseudocoding. So as you can see, mag-start naka-oval shape siya. And then, nag-set ang value. Set equals 5, B equals 6, sum equals 0. Again, ang question, nganong parallelogram ang shape sa paggamit, nganong parallelogram ang atong gigamit ka shape sa pag-set of value? Because again, parallelogram is used to input data and also to output information. Diba? Input, output ang parallelogram. And then calculate, sum equals A plus B. Again, nganong rectangle? Because it's a process. It's a calculation, mathematical process. So, nagamit ta og rectangle. And then, once nakuha na to ang sum, the-output na to ang result. So, as you can see, parallelogram na naman. And then, you have exit. Take note sa arrows, ang flow sa program. Okay, so much for that. We'll have another example. So from this, from this graphical presentation pa lang daan, diba? As you can see, we have this flow, nganing balik na po, ana, balik-balik. Then you can easily say that it's a loop, diba? It's a loop. Alright, again, start, diriya. Next is set A equals 0, B equals 6. So, nag-input ang value, A is equals to 0 and 6. And then sa baba, we have a condition. So if A is less than B, currently A is 0 and B is 6, therefore 0 is less than 6. That's true, di ba? True or false lang ang answer na. Pag true, kani nga process ang iyang sundon. So true man, so i-output niya si A, which is 0. Next, calculate. A equals A plus 1. So currently A is 0 plus 1, so maging 1. Balik na po siya draa. Basahon na po na niya balik. So 1 less than 6, true pa rin. Print na naman si 1. And then pag abot driya, nag-add na po tawag 1 kay A. So maging 2. So balik na po siya draa. So 2 less than 6 up until mahuman jud niya ang condition until mag-false siya. Okay? So for example, nagkuha na ang value ni A kay 5 na. So 5 less than 6, true. So i-print niya si A, which is 5. And then pagdugang niya 1 naging 6. So ningbalik siya. So 6 less than 6 nag-false na. Okay? So pag mag-false na, exit. So you will have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nga output. Okay, so if you're still confused, pause the video, analyze the flow of our program right here. Okay. Okay, so let's proceed on our next example. Okay, so this one is based pa rin na itong problem nga katong nag-solve o grade or average grade. So you'll have set equals fill equals 95, 90 for English, 75 for math, and average is equals to 0, and then i-calculate na to ang average. And if the average is greater than 74, if true, pass. If false, then print niya ang fail. And then both ni siya, after niya i-print ang pass or after niya i-print ang fail, automatic siya nag-connect diretso sa exit kaya wala na may lain. Nag-exit na sila. Okay? And another test for you to follow, I would like you to pause the video and solve the given problem. Okay, so basahan lang na to. So client Y owns a fruit shake stand. The prices of the products depend on the size of the cup regardless of the flavor. Large cup is 65, medium is 55, and the small cup is 45. Meaning, regardless kung unsa nga flavor imuhang paliton, sa unsa pa na siya, nagadepende ang price sa iyahang size sa cup, di ba? Now, your job is to write an algorithm that would display the total amount to be paid by each customer depending on chosen cup or cups and quantity. Also, don't forget to display the change based on the total and the cash given by the customer. So let's say for example sa Jane. Nagpalit siya og 2 pieces nga small cup. Di ba? Ang small cup is 45. So, ang iyahang bayaran sa small cup is a total of 90 pesos. Yan, nagdugang po siya og large cup. Isa lang kabuok. Yan, ang price sa large cup is 65. So, that means ang iyahang gipangpalit is small cup, duha, 90. Large cup, isa, 65. So, the output should be, i-total niyang 90 ug ang 65, the total is 155. Ang cash niya, for example, nagbayad siya og 160, ang kambyo kay 5. Ingon ani dapat ang output sa imuhang algorithm. The total based sa kung sa nga cup yung gipalit and pila ka buok yung gipalit, and then ang ayo siya input for a cash and then the change. So how do you write an algorithm for this? I'll give you the time to solve this one and come back here later para i-compare na to kung design ba ta og solution. Okay, so assuming that you're done, we'll check if the same batag solution. So definition of the problem, the prices differ based on cup sizes. Calculate and display the total based on chosen cups and quantities. And then we'll have to calculate and display the change based on total and cash given. Alright, next. Unsa ba nga mga data ang given? Na ay given nga prices, di ba? Prices. Ang L or large equals to 65. Ako lang i-shortcut. Instead na large, butahan ako siya L. So L is equals to 65 pesos. M is equals to 55. S is 45. And then gi-appeal po na to ang quantity. Missing ang quantity, di ba? So meaning si user dapat ang mag-input ana. Okay? Desired information. Kung sa'y gusto nga output ni client. The total to be paid and at the same time the change, di ba? So ato na siyang i-solve. So this one is my solution. Ato ang i-trace. Okay, trace na to siya. For example, start and then nag-set og mga value. Currently ang total gibutang sa nato og 0 kay wala pa man ta nag-calculate. And then ang change sad kay 0 pa pod kay wala pa man nagbayad si customer. Okay, so naka-question mark ang cup kaya wata kabalo kung unsay pilion ni customer, di ba? So for example, si Jay nagpalit siya. Ingon siya, I want to have a fruit shake nga small. Okay, so small. So that means letter S, di ba? So next, anak ta dire is cup equals to L? True or false? False, di ba? Kay small man yung gipili, ang S man. So dire ta, Is cap equals to M? False gihapon, kay S again ang iyang gipili. Is cap equals to S? Okay, so true na, kay nag-match na. So the price is 45. So ang price karon is 45, na natay value sa price. Ang next is, draa na, quantity. So pila man kabuk imong gusto, Ma'am Jane? So niingon siya duha. Duha kabuk ang iyang gusto. So diri na ta, next. So ang quantity is duha, and then ang price is 45. So that means 2 times 45, so you will get 90. Okay, so ang total currently is 0, so that means 0 plus 90, so it will become, ang total karon may mo na siyang 90, di ba? May mo na siyang 90. Okay, so after that, mag-ask siya, o do you want to add more? Yes or no? So yes is equals to true, no is equals to false. Yan, nag-true man siya. Ningon mo siya yes, dugang pa kung isa. So balik siya draa. Okay? So this time nangutana po siya, unsa may gusto nimo? Ingon ko nga large. Large akong gusto, ma'am. Okay, so asa man ang large draa? So is cap equals to L? True or false? So mag-true na siya kay nag-match man siya sa large, di ba? So diri ata karon. Sulod. So the price is 65, and then baba, the quantity is pila ka book imong gusto, Ma'am Jane? Ingon siya, isa lang. Okay, proceed siya dra. So the quantity is 1, the price is 65. So 1 times 65, so that means 65. Di ba? Currently, ang total kay 90 man. Di ba? So 90. So 90 plus 65, that means ang total na karon is 155, 155 na. 155 ang total karon. Okay? So after makuha ang current total, which is 155, saka siya sa ibabaw, do you want to add more? Yes or no? Okay? So, ingon na siya no na. Okay, so false. Set cash. Pila man imong kwarta draa, nimbayad siya og, let's say for example 160. So next, calculate the change. So cash is 160 minus the total, which is 155. So that means ang change karon is 5 pesos. So i-print dayon, i-print ang total, which is 155, i-print ang cash, which is 160, i-print ang change, which is 5 pesos. So nakuha na to ang gusto ni client. Now, ang question, sir, sa kaning nga part, nganong wala kaning connect draa? Ganun dili nimo dra gi-connect. Ganun dra kaning connect. It's because kung diri ako mo connect balik, ang total mabalik sa 0. Diba? As you can see, total equals to 0. So mabalik siya sa 0, so ma-reset, diba? Dito diri ano lang ko ning diretso, kay diri diretso na siya dra. Pwede gud ko ning unta ning pwede gud unta ni siya ingon wala pa siya problema kay anaon nimo. Basta di na ka mabalik diri sa parallelogram. Kay kung ibalik nimo diri dapita, mabalik siya 0 ang total. So magsingig 0 ang total ni customer. Okay? So if you are still very confused, kindly analyze the flowchart. Gusto nimo imuha siyang i-trace, and dapat mahibala nimo kung unsa ang flow sa imuhang flowchart. Okay? So it depends actually kung tama ba, pareho ba ta or kanang dili og output, but as long as the same ang ato, I mean, it doesn't matter kung pareho ba ta o flowchart or not. What's important is the same ta o final output. Okay? So yeah, that's my example using flowchart, and I hope nasabtan ninyo. And if you want to know more about this one, just wait for our next discussion, because I will probably mag-add pa siguro kog mga additional nga mga examples in writing an algorithm using pseudocode and flowchart. And at the same time, if you want to learn programming, just watch out, because I'll add more videos for you to follow or to learn more about programming. Okay? So thank you, and bye-bye.